Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes from the subreddit exLutheran. It was posting an article link to a Ministry Watch article titled by the user, "Why Reporting Any Crimes Committed by the Church Matters." There are two comments down below the article that I want to read first before I dig into the article. The first one, by user Ersatz Air, reads, "They could save themselves a lot of print by removing the qualifier with a simple, in quotation marks, reporting crime matters, end quotation marks." In response, user Forever Swinging says, "I agree. However, when it comes to the church, any crime committed by the church tends to be considered, quote, not a crime, unquote, which infuriates me." I agree with Ersatz Air that their suggested title makes more sense. However, we all know that regardless of the church body, any church body would not see it as applicable to them. Now to dive into the Ministry Watch article titled, "Why Ministry Watch Reports on Sex Crimes," written by Warren Cole Smith on August 12th, 2021. Another side note, yes, this was written in 2021. However, with all of the abuse scandals that have rocked various church denominations since then, I believe it still is applicable today. Back to the article. It begins, "Hardly a week goes by that Ministry Watch doesn't report on pastors arrested for or credibly accused of sex crimes." Insert image of keyboard with the background underneath it lit up by bright white light. The article continues, "These stories present hard questions for us. How do we report them? Should we report them at all? These questions do not have a, quote, one-size-fits-all, end quote, answers. That's why I want to share some principles that help us make the decision. But first, a quick thought exercise might help you understand why Ministry Watch does, most of the time, opt for reporting on these stories. Imagine you have a headache. What would you do? My guess is you would take some aspirin or Tylenol or whatever and make sure you were getting enough fluids. Not a big deal. Small problems don't need costly solutions. But what if this was the 10th day in a row you had a severe headache? What if you learned everyone in your office building or in your neighborhood was getting headaches and some of those people were ending up in the hospital? Wouldn't you want to know that? I would. I'm guessing you would too. Not only that, if someone tried to keep that information from you, tried to keep it quiet, that would only add to your concern and potentially add to the number of victims of whatever has gone wrong. I'm hoping this anecdote helps explain why reporting distasteful stories, even though the details are tough to face, are necessary, even vital. To be explicit and direct, and with that anecdote as context, here are some key principles we follow. First of all, we do have a bias for telling these stories rather than not telling them. If we don't know how common such stories are or what the conditions that create such behaviors are, then we won't take the tough steps necessary to prevent these incidents from reoccurring. Secondly, we believe reporting such stories unflinchingly doesn't undermine the credibility of the church. It enhances it. It tells the world that we, too, find this behavior reprehensible and we will not give perpetrators a pass. We will not sweep these stories under the rug. We will stand with and protect the victims. Speaking of victims, one of the worst things we do to victims of sexual crimes is downplay their stories. to tell them to, quote, get over it, unquote. Ignoring these stories forces victims to live in silence and pain without the support they deserve to experience the healing they need. Telling these stories provides a measure of justice for the victims and a warning to perpetrators. Fourthly, as the old saying goes, quote, sunlight is the best disinfectant, unquote. The Bible has its own version of that saying, even older and wiser. Quote, the truth will set you free, end quote. Christians should have a bias for wanting to know the truth in all areas of life, no matter how painful that truth might be. In the long run, facing the truth about ourselves and the world is an essential step toward healing the brokenness in ourselves and the world. He continues, how we tell these stories still matters, of course. We believe including enough details to help readers understand the gravity and depravity of the stories is important. However, when sexual acts are involved, it is easy to provide too much information. Getting these aspects of a story right requires judgment and discernment. Also, we do not generally use the names of victims in stories unless the victims explicitly give permission. We would never use the names or photos of children in an abuse story. On the other hand, neither do we publish anonymous accusations or sole-sourced stories. If we publish an accusation against a proven or alleged perpetrator, we require legal documents, multiple credible witnesses known to us, or both. These kinds of stories are hard to write and hard to read, but they are vital to our mission of restoring transparency, accountability, and credibility to the Christian church and the Christian ministry world. If you ever have any feedback on how we report these stories, please email me directly at, I will read out the email address included here below, wsmith, smith, at ministrywatch.com. I'm a huge fan of Ministry Watch and their goals, primarily because of this article. They have the best attitude of any Christian-based ministry or other organization. All too often, we see Christian leaders be complicit in sweeping these cases of abuse, regardless of the kinds of abuse, under the rug because they're more concerned about the impact it will have on their ministry. But it's not their ministry, is it? The whole idea of ministry is to reach out to people with the gospel message. The same gospel message that is claimed to be provided by God Himself. In which case, you are just another person doing the ministry on God's behalf, which then makes you a shepherd. If Jesus had strong words for the Pharisees of His time for misleading His people, what do you think He would have to say about the number of pastors pasturing themselves on their sheep today? Also, I like the stance Ministry Watch takes regarding speaking of victims and their concern for taking proper care of the victims in these stories. Because of the abuse that they've gone through, victims need Christian support, regardless of whether it is a Christian they are coming out against. Finally, I also approve of Ministry Watch stating that their goal is to get as much information as possible that can be factually sourced or established from credible witnesses before publishing. False allegations are still a thing, and their concern over not publishing false allegations is to be commended. On that note, I want to read a comment that was posted on this post in the exLutheran subreddit. The only reason I didn't mention it earlier, along with the other comments, was because at that time it hadn't been posted yet. With it being posted now, and considering how much of a stellar comment it is, I want to highlight it here before I end this video. It is written by user Don't Eat the Cookies Mom. And she says, "In Wells, if you are a child or teenager molested or groomed for sex by a pastor or teacher, it's not even seen as a negative because Wells truly believes that as long as eternity is at stake, any behavior is excusable. They believe these young victims should be thankful to be coupled up with men that are called by God to serve. They see abuse as a blessing. Parents and grandparents in the synod often want nothing more than the social currency of having their daughters attached to big names and pastors, even if sexual grooming and abuse happen to their children." Thank you, user Don't Eat the Cookies Mom, for this comment. This makes it all the more necessary for more light to be shed on those abusive personalities within the Wells. And that concludes today's video. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.